That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, let's get things rolling. I'm super excited to be here and sit down and talk with you today, because this is the first time in a long time I've gotten to record an episode of the Captain's Log. This is episode 13 for those of you out there who do not know yet. Yes, we've had 12 previous episodes of this, and technically we've had even more before that. But we'll get into it a little bit down the road, but the guy that I was podcasting with stepped down a couple of months ago, and that's why we stopped making this. But I am here with Eric Mannix to hopefully start up some new adventures with the Captain's Log here.
Oh, we're going to get into some shenanigans.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So to kind of give you guys an idea of what this podcast will be, this is kind of our off-topic show. This is where we can just kind of come at the end of each week or at the start or whenever we decide to actually make this. We're working on a set time. But this will be our thing where we can just come and hang out and chat and share stories and make fun of each other and stuff like that. So
yeah. I'll be honest, this is kind of my favorite format, too, just because I am a chaotic mess, and if you ever listen to my old show Out of the Fridge, I mean, you know, I read all the books and whatever, but I was always horrible at, like, taking notes, and so often my input was random dad jokes and non sequiturs, and, like, occasionally a gem would slip in there, but often it was just total fucking bullshit, because I'm just... a garbage person. So this is the Captain's Log is perfect for me and what I do, which is just random nonsense.
Yeah. If you guys are not watching this live, you totally should be. We are live right now on twitch.tv/the Whatnauts. If you guys are catching this a week later on YouTube or iTunes, that is A-OK as well. Sound off in the comments or something. But yeah, if you missed the live stream, you'll have to join us next time. We will be letting you guys know on Twitter when that will be happening. But yeah, man, I've kind of come to appreciate this kind of show, like as I've continued podcasting, where there is no set topic, there is no we have a book to talk about or something. Just one where you can come and hang out is totally fun. So
since you have a successful show, I'm sure you get asked. I know I certainly do. People want to know, how do you get the word out there, man? How do you get people to listen to your show, and how do you keep people engaged? And that's kind of a hard question to answer. But one thing that I give anyone that asks me for podcasting advice is simply be yourself. And do not shy away from doing so. It sounds like a simple thing, but I know I've stopped listening to shows when they were so on topic, so on brand, that like the minute they would start to digress and actually get into a really interesting conversation, they would like steer it right back. You know what I mean? And I get, if you, like, I've listened to, like, X-Men podcasts, for example, where they spent the whole time talking about Gossip Girl. So, I mean, I get at a certain point, you're there for a certain thing. I mean, like, so I understand that, but I guess there's, like, a balance to me where any show that I continue listening to, it's because I like the hosts more than even the content itself. And that's just me personally. Your mileage may vary, but so I think a show like The Captain's Log, it was one that, as a fan of the Whatnauts, I was always, one of the ones I look forward to the most. Of course, I liked all the episodes, but where it was just, you and Paul getting to be yourselves, and so I'm definitely excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, sweet. It'll be fun. I don't know how many of like this type of show you listen to, but I've recently started to get into like the Rooster Teeth podcast and a couple of their shows. As well as Achievement Hunters.
I still need to check them out.
Off topic. It's a lot of fun. It's just like especially with achievement hunters, their whole thing is video games and stuff, and then they have this one where they can just kind of come and drink, and you actually get to know like who they are and stuff like that. So I'm excited for this because I've always listened to your podcasts and stuff, and you kind of had that thing where if you listen to a show long enough, you kind of know them, like you know the host, you know their stories and stuff that they share. But there's been very few times where I've actually gotten to talk to you.
I know on Out of the Fridge from the very beginning. I mean, we were, and they still are, very passionate about comic books. That's the whole reason, we started the show.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I was a big advocate from the beginning of we have to put ourselves in there. We have to put ourselves in the show.
Very much.
It has, because anyone can do it. Anyone can do it, and that doesn't mean they have the expertise that we have. But some people don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Anyone can review a book, can do a summary, whatever, and we need to flush into it. Why am I covering it? And so that it was always important to me that, like, well, who am I? I'm a guy that works at a comic book store. I think if you're a geek, you would probably find that interesting. And so when I'm talking about a book, I'm not just talking about what I think of the art and the story and even like the political and kind of social themes. I also would try to throw in like, oh, well, this is a book that I like to recommend at work, for like, kids or whatever. And like, I've noticed a strong response. And I tried to always throw, my personal relevance with whatever the subject matter was, and people did seem to respond to it pretty strongly.
For sure.
We've met a lot of really cool people going to cons and doing whatever, and there was this like cool sense of like you were friends with these people. That's why like I did my first episode with Belinda of Indie Focus Pod the other day, and she was like, well, I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm like, yeah. But to me, I was like, well, I never referred to listeners of the show as fans, and I never will, because that, to me, that takes a passive role, where like I always said friends of the show. So like anyone that listened to Out of the Fridge was a friend of the show. I always wanted it to be an active dialogue. Like, I want feedback. I want your story. And we've read people's stories on the air and things like that when they've been comfortable sharing emails with us and things like that. And and that's what I love moving forward with the Whatnauts, the fact that we're live streaming, people can ask questions, people can actually like interact with us live. I've always been a lot more excited about an actual dialogue going on. I'm totally uninterested in like, oh, this is me, pay attention to me, and then just like shower me with praise or whatever. Like, that's not interesting to me at all.
Yeah. So you mentioned you work at a comic book store. I'm kind of curious as to what your experience has been like working at a shop.
It's been really awesome, man. I work at a shop called Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics. It's in Lacey, Washington. If you're not familiar with the Pacific Northwest, Olympia is the capital of Washington State. It's not a terribly large city. There's like 40,000 people or something. Lacey, there's three cities, Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater, that are essentially all like one giant mega city. Like, the borders all bleed together. So I technically live in Lacey, and the shop that I work at is also in Lacey. But I just tell people I live in Olympia because it's a lot easier. More people have heard of Olympia than Lacey.
Sure.
Although people from out of town always think, oh, Seattle's the only place. I'm like, well, Seattle's an hour away from me, so it's not like super close or anything. But the shop I work at, it's actually the largest on the West Coast.
Nice.
Which, according to our Diamond rep, and Diamond is the people that you buy new comics from.
And you
so
also hate if you're a comic book worker too.
Yeah, the bane of your existence if you work at a comic book store. But my boss Gabby is really awesome. She's a wonderful human being. She's run the business for over 25 years. I've worked there for almost 7. This October will be 7 years. When
That's
I
awesome.
started at the shop, my oldest, Caitlin, was like 4 months old, and she just turned 7. So just to show you how long I've worked there. It's a trip. I used to have this really dumb this dumb opinion of work, I guess, just in general, that like I couldn't work at a job if I liked the field it was in. So, like, for example, I play guitar and I love music, and my favorite music store, Music 6000 in town, they were hiring years ago, and I refused to apply there. I knew I had a good chance. I knew my stuff, but I was like, I can't work there because I can't work there because I love it, and if I work there, I'll hate it. Because
I was gonna say,
at that point,
like,
I'd hated every job.
Scared to, like, oh no, I actually secretly hate this, and it's the worst, and it's ruined my love of guitar.
Yeah, I guess it was just, I don't know. I guess I felt that at the time that I would associate. And to be fair, okay, like I was a care provider for a long time. The first real job I had, I was a paper boy. I was a dishwasher in high school. So, I mean, I had some, like, very labor-intensive, very low-paying, pretty high-stress, and just pretty awful jobs. And so, and, like, I associated, those particular restaurants, those particular fields with that work. And so that was always the fear. It was like, oh, well, I'll never want to go into the music store, even years later if I had worked there. I'll just hate it, which is really stupid, of course, now because, I've worked at the shop for years now, and I love it, and it's great, and, I go in my time off, and I buy my comics and hang out, and so it seems silly now, but that was, my mindset before before working there. And just as a fan of comics, it is really interesting seeing how the sausage is made, kind of like being there when the comics are delivered and put up on the shelf and prepared, and it just cool stuff like that, and even just seeing, like, because we order comics like 2 months in advance of when they come out, and just all the interesting stuff that's probably not interesting to most people, but
business
I only
side
have
of
a handful
things.
of hobbies, and when I get into something, I get like really into it. So I find it fascinating, like how like the retail system works and how comics are ordered and all that kind of stuff. So to me, I just have a deeper appreciation of comics now, and going hand in hand with that, going to like Comic Cons and like meeting these creators and seeing that they are actual real people, and then realizing how many of them have like day jobs and do it on the side. When you're a kid, I remember thinking like, oh, these guys work in like the Marvel office, and I think back in the day there was more truth to that than there's these days, where like there'd actually be people on staff that would like hang out in a big corporate office building all day, and that was always like in my mind as a child. You'd have like, oh yeah, Jack Kirby's sitting in some like high rise somewhere right now, like drawing pages, and like Stanley's like running in and like, hey kid, let's get this book out on time, and like when really it's a lot of people working at home, and nowadays it's a email back and forth and that kind of thing. But that was always my like, super simplified version of it as a kid. So it's just been really cool, honestly, because it's all kind of gone hand in hand. It's like working at the shop, getting to know Kelly and Allison and Andrew, joining out of the fridge, doing cons. It's like just deepened my appreciation for just the comics industry in general and how comics are made. So it's been really cool. I've been doing it for a long time, and it's fun. It's good times. It's good times. It's not a bad way to earn a living, talking about Captain America all day.
For sure. So we have a question from the chat. Sam
beautiful.
Is in the chat hanging out with us, and they want to know who or what is Bobby Krogan? Where did you get that nickname, Twitter handle?
That's a good question. Thank you, Sam. So my best friend Alan, many years ago, this is back when I still had hair, it was that long ago, he bought the Smashing Pumpkins' Greatest Hits, and there was a picture of Billy Corgan with really long hair around the time of their first album, Gish, and I had really long hair at the time, and he was like, dude, like, you look like Billy Corgan, but you're like the broke version, you're like Bobby Krogan, right? And so that was the joke, was that I was a broke-ass Billy Corgan because I play guitar, but he's a lot better than I am. And
there you go.
I'm 6 foot, and I think he's like 6'6" or something. Billy Corgan is a giant. He's a huge man. But that's how it started, was that Bobby Krogan was like, it was like how there's Dr. Thunder instead of Dr. Pepper or something. That was like, I was the off-brand version. So that's where that came from, and it's just a dumb nickname that stuck. I will say my favorite thing about it is, all my all my friends call me Eric. Everyone that knows me from work calls me Mannix, which is my last name.
Yeah.
So I always know who knows me from work and who knows me from my personal life. But
Well,
I know who knows me from Twitter
from
because
the podcast too.
Yeah, anyone from the podcast knows me Mannix too. That's true.
Mannix, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone from podcasting as well. In podcasting land, I'm most known as Mannix, which is fine. But yeah, on social media, a lot of the time, whether it's on my Instagram or my Twitter, when I get DMs from people trying to sell me something or have me hype their book or whatever, it's always, "Hey, Bobby." I'm like, fucking name isn't Bobby. Damn it. It cracks me up. I do find it funny. So it's good for profiling purposes too. If you call me Bobby, I know that you don't know me.
Yeah. Oh, I've definitely done it too. Like, where I'll be like, even talking like about your shows like to someone else, like, oh yeah, and then Bobby said this. I'm like, God damn it, that's not his name.
It's all good. I mean, I've been called worse. I'd rather be called Bobby than, son of a bitch or something. So it's whatever.
Yeah,
it's not a bad nickname as far as nicknames go.
For sure. I don't think I ever really had any nicknames growing up. I was always that kid who just, like, I fit in with everyone, and so I kind of floated from, like, group to group. So everyone knew me, but they didn't know me enough to, like, oh, you're, we'll make up this nickname for you. It's just like, oh, there's Kyle.
Yeah, the nickname thing is a double-edged sword, because you always think you're going to get a badass nickname, like, Yo Dog, everyone calls me Ninja, but it's usually like, you fart in the cafeteria one day and you're like Toot Boy for like 12 years or something. That's usually how nicknames work. It's like, you get some fucking horrible nickname that you hate. So at least,
hey there, Toot Boy, how's it going, like, Toot Boy?
Well, and like, Bobby Krogan's a funny one because, it's... People actually often, I think they just assume it's my real name. It's only people that realize that it's similar enough to to Billy Corgan that do it, I think. Because, most people are like, oh, your name's Bobby, that's fine, that's weird. It always cracks me up. When I was a kid, my nickname was Hugo because my best friend Joey, who's Mexican-American, his one of the kids at his mom's daycare, walked up to me one day and was like, oh, you guys twins, which, of course we thought was hilarious because I'm like the whitest dude on the planet. Like, I am so milky.
You and me both.
While we are both beautiful, handsome men, like, our skin tones are nothing alike. Like, Joey can tan, and, well, I'm a melanoma survivor. So, yeah, we have different relationships with the sun. But from that day, that was like in early high school. So, yeah, earlier than the Bobby Krogan days, I was Hugo the Evil Twin, which was a riff on the Simpsons, one of the Treehouse of Horrors, where Bart had an evil twin they kept in the attic. So
that's funny.
So I guess I also like Bobby Krogan better than Hugo the Evil Twin, I guess.
Hugo just makes me think of Lost. Like, that's what
I
know
I was thinking it was, the big dude,
yeah. So one of the things I kind of wanted to get into and talk about some is our history with podcasting and stuff like that, and like how we got into it, why we do it, what our philosophy kind of is behind it, and stuff like that. Because recently, you and I were kind of in not the same but similar boats, and that's kind of how we are here today. My co-host stepped down, and you stepped down from your shows. And so we're both like, hey, do you want to, like, team up and join forces?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The minute I saw that Paul had left, my first thing was, oh, man, that sucks. And then I was also like, oh, I guess I'm not surprised. Like, Paul, I love him to death. But he, as a listener of the show, I was like, man, I don't know. It felt like he wasn't as into it the last, couple times. But then, very selfishly, I wrote you right away and was like, hey, man, I mean, I'm not trying to be too presumptuous here, but if you ever needed help on the show, I mean, I would love to do it. I mean, I didn't know if you'd actually say yes, but I was like, I'll throw that out there just to see.
Yep.
Just because I was a big fan of the Whatnauts, of course.
Paul is a fantastic guy, and if he's listening to this, I love him to death, but he knows we were very opposite people. I mean, we're both art kids, and we both were into like comics and stuff. Me more so like as a writer, him more just like I like the like being around it. Like I like that kind of like pop culture stuff, and so that was kind of one of our excuses to like start podcasting. Like, well, why don't we just explore that stuff? Like, I can show you some good comics and things like that, and we're like, yeah, sure, sweet. And like for us specifically, we were throwing ideas against the wall to see what stuck. In fact, one of the first ideas we had was to take some kind of like topic or question within like comic book, video game, nerd kind of fandom stuff, and kind of like some topic where we can kind of argue different sides and have that be the show. And so we did a couple like test episodes, and the first one we did was can zombies die of natural causes? Like,
they just like fall apart.
Yeah, can they just like decay into nothingness? Like if they just don't eat, like will they just sit there and chill, or will they decompose into nothing? And so we had that, and then we had an episode on Alfred Pennyworth and who Alfred Pennyworth was, and if we could pitch a comic that was all about Alfred Pennyworth, Batman's butler, like what would that be? Because we found out something, and we're like, dude, he's actually really fascinating. Like, he's a really cool character.
Yeah. Alfred, depending on what area you're talking, he was like a soldier and like a field surgeon and like I think he was a secret. I think he was a spy at one point.
Yeah.
Like Alfred has all these like secret pimp skills that like you just never knew about, and it's like he's like no idea, kind of even more trained than Batman.
Yeah, and so
Alfred's the best.
We found that super fascinating. But one of the things we were like starting, I was like, what if we do cold opens like they Jay and Miles do, so something that's just really outlandish and stupid, and just have this like, wait a minute, what? Like, that makes no sense, but we eventually landed on what is now the Whatnauts review show. And at the time we were calling it the Whatnauts podcast. But that was very much inspired by what you guys were doing on Out of the Fridge. Actually,
that's a huge honor, man.
I found you guys through View from the Gutters, and so I was listening to both of them. But it wasn't until I kind of started listening to your guys' show that I was like, you know what? These guys like aren't famous. Like, these guys don't have like a super like they don't have a super big show. I mean, your guys' show was fairly popular, but still, like, it's not like an NPR level show and stuff like that. It didn't have that kind of like backing or stuff like that, and it wasn't until I realized that I was like, I can kind of do that too. Like, I don't have to be some kind of big famous person. It can just be me and Paul discussing what we thought of this book or this movie or this TV show. And I had always wanted to collaborate with you, but I didn't know how to broach the topic because I was always worried you guys would be like, well, you guys kind of do the same thing that we do, and so that's kind of weird. So in the back of my mind,
I always got asked. Yeah.
Yeah, it
was always like a scheduling thing before.
Yeah, in the back of my mind, it was like, I hope they don't feel like we're stepping on their toes and like stealing their
never.
mojo and stuff like that. But that's why I was like, what if we just do more than comics? Like, what if we have like manga and movies and TV shows and stuff like that? And we were like, yeah, sure, that works.
Well,
that's our own thing. So.
That's a huge honor, first of all, and I was never competitive. I never have been. It's just not how I view life, just in general. Like, to me, it's not a competition. When I was on Out of the Fridge, I was always very serious about like the numbers. It was very important to me to know like how many people had listened to an episode and to track the growth. I always wanted to feel like we were growing and getting,
sure,
even if it was like a trickle, But that was just for me, just to feel like we were going somewhere, not just being stagnant, And the show did have very slow but steady growth over time. Like, we never really had like big spikes where, suddenly like 100 more people would listen, but it might be like 5 people listened the next week, and then the next week and the next week kind of thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that was always enough. And so, like, when I discovered, your show via Twitter, I was just excited, and I just started listening in right away. And I've always enjoyed talking shop, and so, I liked that I, had some other podcasting friends, basically.
Yeah.
To me, it was more of a camaraderie thing, man. I've never been, like, super... Like, we got in competitions and things, with, like, other local podcasts.
Sure.
And to be like, vote for this best of. And certainly, I wanted to win, but I never...
And you guys
looked at the other shows and
quite a
were
few
like,
times.
I'm better than them. I never viewed it that way. The way I viewed it was like, even if we place at all, it's free advertising for us and more people listen to the show was always
sure.
how I viewed it, And so, that's... As far as... I guess how I got into it in the first place, it was View from the Gutters. It was Cade, Toby, Joe, and Andrew all came into the shop when I was working one day, and unbeknownst to me, Andrew had already told them that I was going to be a host on the show, like, because it was Andrew's show. I didn't know this at the time. The rest of them, Andrew went off to read a book or do whatever he was doing. The rest of them decided for about 45 minutes to grill me, and it was pretty cute because I think they thought they were going to stump me. Where were you on the night of the murder? And of course, just trying to throwing out the most geeky, questions they could, and of course, I didn't even sweat because I've been reading comics for 33 years now. So
I bet you can't even name 5 Batman villains.
I don't even remember what they asked, but it was like, if it was supposed to be hard, I kind of felt bad. But I was answering the questions between doing my job and helping people, whatever, and then they kind of conferred for like 5 minutes in like a huddle, and then they came back and were like, "All right, man, we want you to join the show." And and that felt really cool. That was the first time I had ever been on a podcast. I had been a listener of podcasts, for years. I was a care provider for a long time, and the big thing that got me into listening to shows was one of the guys I used to work with liked to go for these super long walks for like 3 or 4 hours some days, and I got tired of listening to my music pretty quick, and so I switched over to podcasts, and there was a few, mostly comic and video game related ones that I would listen to, but it was one of those I never thought that I could do it. It was very, very similar to your situation, where like, even though I was like, like Facebook friends or Twitter friends with like some of these like people,
sure.
and I knew they were like, regular people too,
right?
But they weren't people I knew, right, in real life. And then like these people I knew, like Andrew I'd worked with, and these guys asking me, and then that made me realize, I can do this, like, because you guys do it, and you're just people like me,
Yeah.
and you put out a quality show, and so I guess that means that I could do it too. And I did it a handful of times, and due to my schedule, I wasn't able to make it as a regular on the show, but I really enjoyed it. And it was a trip because I had been a fan, of their show already. As soon as I found out Andrew had a show, and so I definitely geeked out a little bit and was like, that's cool. It was definitely like a huge honor to be asked.
That's awesome.
And then, so I think I was on View from the Gutters 5 or 6 times ever. Like, I wasn't on a ton, but it was always really cool whenever I was, and I always enjoyed the hell out of it. Kelly and Allison, who were still are co-workers of mine at the comic shop. They had started a Tumblr blog that they were kind of infrequently working on, and their Tumblr blog it was started by Kelly just as a way to force herself to read more and step out of her comfort zone, which is like, Batman comics. And so they had been working on that. They had been toying with the idea of doing a podcast of their own. And at first they kind of came to me, and I didn't know them terribly well. I mean, like, again, we were, coworkers, but like, I liked them just fine, but didn't know them terribly well. They started asking me because I was like the expert, right? Because I had been on View from the Gutters a handful of times, just random podcasting questions. And so it was like purely an advisory kind of role thing. And so I was answering any questions that they asked. And then I was actually really shocked when they asked me to be a part of it with them. So I was like, wow, yeah, it was a huge honor. So
that's
I
cool.
said, yeah, of course, definitely. That sounds awesome. And we did a similar thing where, like, we didn't quite know what the format was going to be at first. We knew we didn't want to be, like, a review show because no one cares what I think of a book, right? So I'm not going to be like, it's 5 stars because, like, what does that mean? That's, like, such an abstract concept. So Eric Troutman... my other boss, Gab's husband, he's a comic book writer. He's really awesome. But he suggested that we compare and contrast 2 similar books. And so that was the format for the first handful of months. And that's how we discovered Revival and Rachel Rising, 2 similar yet different books that we both really loved. And that was, episode 1. And it was only a handful of months we did that before we kind of went off. And at first we were like so excited. We did, I think it was episode 2, we did Thor, and I think we read like 9 or 10 trade paperbacks in like a week. At first we were like very ravenous, and like, the Thor episode is insane. We covered so many books, and it was like, bullet points on each one. I mean, we didn't really do like a deep dive into anything. We realized pretty early on that we needed to slow down and like, maybe let's cover 1 or 2 trade paperbacks worth of material in a week, and then talk about it for 90 minutes and really delve into it. And that's so it wasn't really until Andrew joined the show, because for the first 4 months or so we recorded at the shop after hours, and Gab graciously allowed us to record there for free, and it was really awesome. Our buddy Jamie Coe, who's a pro level musician, he would bring in this rack mounted recording system. We each had like a dynamic mic in front of us, and then we had room mics, these 2 condenser mics that were so sensitive that we had to turn off the AC and unplug the phone and do all this stuff because the mics would pick up like any possible
the struggle
noise. But the sound quality was like obscene. I mean, it was like overkill for any podcast ever. The show always sounded amazing, but I think the first 5 or 6 episodes, like, they sound so good. I mean, it's like so ridiculous. It's like, it's a podcast. Oh my god! But Jamie graciously volunteered his time for that. But it was one of those, the shop's super busy, and whenever we'd have a sale or a special event, we couldn't record, or it would get delayed. It also meant we had to record like right after work, so I didn't get to go home and eat dinner and actually see my family and my kids some days before they went to bed, and so that was rough. Andrew had a studio from doing View from the Gutters and from just doing his own thing. He graciously said that we could come on down and he would just record us.
That's cool.
And so for maybe an episode and a half, I think, he just recorded us. We offered right away, like, man, if you want to be on the show, just be on the show if you ever have something to say. And he didn't want to jump in at first, which I get. I think it was halfway through, like, Rat Queens, he started jumping in and grabbing a mic and saying stuff. And there was a funny period where it was like, oh, you can be on the show if you want. And he was like, oh, no, I'm not on the show. But he would still, have a mic anyway. And even to this day, he probably still says he doesn't get a pick. He always said he never got a pick. But he officially became a member pretty quick, and the minute we started recording at his studio, we actually started releasing things on time, which was a big part of why people kept listening, because we started hitting consistent release dates. That's another thing, is being consistent. Key. A lot of shows pod fade. So in the first 5 episodes, it took maybe a month. Yeah, definitely.
What was like the light bulb moment for you when it wasn't just like, yeah, I can do this, but like, hey, yeah, like I actually want to keep doing this. I want to make content. I want to make podcasts. I want to, like, get all of this stuff out there. Did you have a specific moment, or did it kind of grow over time?
I think it's definitely something that grew over time. I mean, certainly being asked to be on Views was like, wow. Then we realized, that I could do it. And then Kelly and Allison asking me to join their, brand new show. Again, it was a huge honor, but I can't say there was one definitive moment. I've always wanted to be creative. That's why I love photography. It's why I love playing guitar. I mean, I've always had a part of me that's wanted to do something more than just sit around and watch TV all day. I mean, I have that side of me too, don't get me wrong, but so I don't know, podcasting, especially doing out of the fridge, really scratched an itch where it was like, well, I get to be creative, I get to create content. It really felt like I found my niche because I'd been a lifelong comic reader, and I have this like knowledge base, and so I got to share that with people, and that was really exciting. At the same time, I'm consistently being turned on to new books and new experiences as well, and so I'm also being forced out of my comfort zone and having to check out new things, which is awesome. I can get stuck in a rut just like anyone else, and like manga, for example, is my Achilles heel. I just don't know that much. But, on the show, one of the big rules was always you have to read it. Because that was the other thing we did early on, was we used to vote on everything. Everything was a democratic process, and including, topics. And I'll be honest, that just didn't work pretty early on. I kind of half joked that the show was a rotating dictatorship. Because each person got their own pick. It just so happened that we had 4 members, and so the
Andrew never got
4
one.
weeks, and so that Andrew somehow always got a pick, but I mean, I guess those were delegated to him, I guess, but they were all books he liked, I guess. We're just really nice, I guess, about it. I bet he is probably. I can still hear it right. I bet he is still saying it, that he doesn't get a pick. But I think he finally admitted that he got like 2 picks ever or something.
I've spent the past like day and a half catching up on their recent stuff because of all of the E3 stuff. There's so many people putting out content. Oh, we saw this game. Here's what we thought. So my stuff just stacked up. So it had been a few weeks since I listened to their show. So I've spent the past day just binging it.
Right on. Yeah, the thing that I think works for us was everyone gets a pick. What did it was, again, we'd been voting on everything, attempting to agree on everything, and then Kelly got really down one day and said, I really want to do Sailor Moon, but I don't think anyone would vote for it. And so I just said, well, fuck it, that's your pick. Like, here's what we're going to do from now on. Each person gets to pick a month. There's no vetoes. You have to read the book. You don't have to like it. But you have to read it. And I thought that was cool. And so then at that point, the only thing that we voted on was the theme of the month. So we would vote on the theme, and then within that, everyone got a pick, themes, and no one gets to veto. No one gets to say I don't want to read it. You have to read it, and it's cool because there's books that I end up really like. Sunstone, for example, I wouldn't have picked up Sunstone otherwise.
Right.
It just didn't look like it was going to be a book for me. It ended up being one of my favorite comics. It's absolutely fantastic. But I remember when we got in at the shop, I flipped through it and was like, ooh, I don't not to sound like a prude, but I just don't think it's my scene. But then I read it for the show and was like, this is really amazing. And I know, like, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, Xenozoic Tales, that was one that, like, I know Alice in particular was really into that she wouldn't have picked up otherwise. And so I like that I got turned on to other stuff. I like that I turned my friends on to other things as well.
That's cool.
But that's all because, we had a rule where, like, again, you have to read it. That's it.
Yeah, with me and Paul, since it was just us two, and I guess we still do it now on the review show, we always wanted options and to be like, okay, here's like I have 3 options for you. I have a comic book and 2 movies or something, and they can be themed, or they can be not related. But then to hear like the other person working out, well, we just did comics, so I'm not gonna pick that one. And of these movies, we like I've never seen this type of thing, or whatever it may be. So like like that was our own way of like, let's explore what else is out there without being like, well, here's what I want to read this week, and here it was like, well, it. To us, it was a good mix. It was like, here's things that I want to read this week, or soon. But you pick one. That way, it could be something we both want. It could be, I mean, we've had things that we've both absolutely loved, and we've had things that we've hated. We've had things that like he liked and I didn't, or so it ended up being a good mix of stuff.
Yeah, no, I like the way you do it on the review show, because it's like, because you're nominating a short list, but then there's still some choice, in the other person getting to choose between that short list, and there's a good push-pull dynamic there. I've got to say, I just thought of it on View from the Gutters, one of my all-time favorite episodes, and I was not on this one, was, there was the Earth X series, and I don't remember like the order that the books come out, but the third volume in the Earth X series, I remember they really liked the first one, and they thought the second one was okay, and then they positively hated the third one. But they got to the point where they like, and again, because they voted to like do the book,
right?
And they were just like the whole time like, oh my god, all this book, and like they were just like in like actual physical agony. And I don't think I've ever laughed more listening to one of their episodes. And the whole time, like I finally, the next time I saw Joe, I was like, you didn't have to do it. It's like, no, we did, man, we did. We had to complete it. I'm like, but you didn't. Like, you didn't, though. That's something that like I'll never cease to stop finding funny. Is that like they just tortured themselves for 90 minutes. Yeah, that's funny. More, I guess, including all the reading time and put involved in it. But one of their most beautiful episodes was the third installment of that series. Because damn,
that's hilarious. Oh man, yeah. So I can sit here and talk shop about podcasting and stuff for all day, basically, because I'm always fascinated at people's process and just like the way they want to talk about stuff. Like, how do you deal with something, especially I know we're gonna have the Indie Focus podcast coming up hopefully later this year. Like how, like, especially with indie books, how do you deal with, like, I guess you and I haven't really talked too much about the show, but how like, what are you thinking in terms of like what happens when an indie creator like comes to you, pitches their book, you write it, say you'll do it for the show, and then it ends up like being a book that you don't like, like it's not all that good, like is like how do you, I guess my question is like, how do you deal with talking about something you don't like?
That's a harder one, because I know it's important to me to not be like inherently negative for the sake of being negative. I feel like there's a lot of just toxic bullshit out there in Geekland. Mm-hmm. So like I don't want to hate on something just to hate on something. At the same time, my word is very important. It's something that I take very seriously, and I'm a big fan of integrity, and I feel like I have to be honest about my thoughts and views on things, because again, it's just my opinion and no one has to care, but if people are listening to my show, it's because they do care. And so yeah, if I don't like something, I mean, I have to say it. I mean, I think it also depends, like, is the thing, like, if I don't like the book because it's racist, sexist, if there's like, you know, themes in the book that I don't like, we will have that conversation. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to like pick fights with people, but also like if they're going to be on the show, they got to know, like, come on, man, like we're going to go there. If it's like, you know, the art just isn't my cup of tea or whatever, or like the writing's a bit sophomoric, I mean, like, I'm not going to like, you know, insult that because there's no point, and I'm not going to be a dick. Yeah. So I guess it depends on like why I don't like the book. If I don't like the book for like its themes or whatever, yeah, that's definitely like a conversation that we will have for sure. Yeah, because I don't think it's something we really shied away from on Out of the Fridge, and I don't see any reason to start now. You know.
Yeah, because I've always been. I think being an artist and going through art school, like we had to learn to critique things, and it's like you learn very quickly that it's not about just saying like, oh, I like this, or oh, this is bad. Like you have to explain why. Like yeah, why is this speaking to you? Why does this work? Why does it not? You know, and that was always something that was very important to Paul and I when we started up the Whatnauts, and which is now the review show. Of just like, hey, if we find something that we absolutely do not like, we have to be able to still talk about it and not just be like, this is bad, this is terrible, blah blah blah. We have to be like, hey, this is bad and it's not working because I did not get this, or A, B, and C, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, well, but and I also think that the best shows have some conflict.
Sure, yeah.
I know there was episodes of Fridge where we all liked a book equally, and I think those are some of the most boring episodes, because you're just kind of like, I loved it, I also loved it, and it's like, I always want to hype the things I love for sure, and not just tear things down. At the same time, I mean, like any book has problematic. Every book has problematic elements. Every film does, whatever. And again, it doesn't mean you have to like hate it, or that the people that did it were bad people or whatever. It's more that like, okay, if this book came out in 1986 and like I still really love it. Okay, well, what was going on at the time? And you can talk about things like context to me are really important and really matter. And so I guess that's a part of any conversation is. Okay, instead of just being like, this thing happened and I find it to be offensive because I think it's sexist, instead of just saying something like that, if I found something in a work that I did find offensive, I guess I would say, okay, this character said this, here was the context of it in the work, here is the year that this book came out, the writer is this person, try to, and, especially on like Indie Focus, I'm going to try to have the creators on as much as possible, so ideally, I could just ask them directly, what was your thought process during this? But, without having that aid, you kind of have to just put yourself in their shoes as much as you can. And I think conversations like that are interesting, and to me they are the most interesting when you're kind of just dissecting a work, positive and negative, and just trying to figure out why they assembled it the way they did, and why things either work or don't, and really get into the nuts and the bolts. As a fan of the medium, that's always what I find super fascinating. I mean, I like to say with like Terry Moore, for example, he's one of my favorites, and one of the things I love about him is he's the writer and the artist. I know you guys just did Strangers in Paradise.
Yep.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic series. To me, I love the man. I don't think he can do any wrong, but I love that since he's the writer and the artist, to me, there's an economy there in the storytelling where if he can show you on the page with a glance, with body language, or just establishing something in the scene simply by drawing it, he will. And it's a visual medium, right? So to me, I'd rather read his books than like, I know I'm going to do a lot of shit from this, but like, I love Alan Moore, but like Alan Moore will do these gigantic, exposition dumps, and they're very beautiful and full of flowery prose and everything, and a lot of his stuff is really good, and I love a lot of his writing. At the same time, there's these giant, text bubbles, and I love to read books. I don't necessarily love to read comics, if that makes sense. I like comics that actually have as little dialogue as possible, and when the dialogue's there, I want it to be very conversational. I love reading old school stuff, but it's always funny when it's like, I am Cyclops and I have laser beams and I will show you right now by using my laser beams, and it's being drawn on the page at the same time. He's like telling you, and I get part of that was like, whatever, these books were made for kids, and like they didn't know if a kid was going to read the next issue or the one previous. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I like to delve into when I'm talking about a comic, though, is like, how was the story told and how is that effective or ineffective. And I don't know, I love all that stuff and I find all that fascinating. And as a fan of comics, I think it's actually deepened my love of comics.
Sure.
And like, I've gotten to talk to Terry Moore now, and he's just a regular old dude, just a chill dude. I've seen him there just chilling with his wife Robin, who like runs like the business part of things, and like super super nice, friendly, just down to earth people. But like, to me, it's like, dude, legend though, legend, man, goat, like the man, just a regular dude, but big fan of his work, and appreciate it even more now that I've read it and reread it and dissected it. Like Rachel Rising, we did 4 times on Out of the Fridge, because we did it on episode 1, and then every year on Halloween we would get caught up until the book ended. And every time I read it, I caught something new every time. Some kind of foreshadowing, some brilliant little tease that I hadn't caught before, and that's with me looking, And so he's one that never ceases to impress. And if it wasn't for podcasting and having to think with a more critical eye, I wouldn't fully appreciate it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's difficult sometimes to talk about what you love too, though. Like it goes both ways. Where you
I've been afraid to talk. I've been afraid to bring books that I've loved before.
Yeah, because you're just gonna sit there and be like, oh my god, I love it. It's the greatest. Oh my god. And
also you don't like it's like you don't want I'm someone that, like, if you walk up to me and tell me that you think I'm an asshole, if you're some stranger, I'm going to be like, cool, I don't care. I don't know who you are. But if you're my friend and you say that, I'm going to, like, cry, because it's like, I actually give a shit what you think, right? And so, if like, we're talking about something as friends, right, and you're like, oh, man, like, Mannix, I think Top Gun is the worst movie ever, I'm just going to openly weep, because it's my movie, and I love it. So it's hard when you're...
I was saving that for next episode, but...
Except, you can't say that because Top Gun is awesome, and everyone knows this.
And I hate hackers too.
My wife is in the background rolling her eyes at me right now. Hackers is also the shit. One of the highlights of my entire life was we did. Oh my god, what was that book? Motor Crush.
Okay, yeah.
Because they always, especially Andrew, used to love to make fun of me about how much I love Hackers, because it's like I'm just obsessed with that movie. And it's a ridiculous movie. But Babs Tard listened to that episode.
Yep.
And she tweeted at us, and she said, I'm totally going to watch Hackers now.
I remember when that happened.
Fuck you. Babs Tard said Hackers was dope.
I remember when that happened.
I win. Victory. I've never been prouder in my entire life than that moment.
That's funny.
Woo!
Oh man.
No, but it's hard though when you're into something though, because there's a vulnerability that you bring to the table when it's a work that's like very personally relevant to you, like something that's your favorite. Because to be honest and to be authentic, you have to rip it apart. You have to go there. So I think it's actually, those are the hardest conversations I've had. Like the Rocketeer, we did the Rocketeer on Fridge, and they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all, and all their points were valid. It's
sure.
like it's a pretty sexist work. I mean, that's true. It's not the most original. And it's like, any of the points that they had, it's like, I couldn't refute them. It's also like your opinion, and I cannot tell you that your opinion is wrong. And a lot of it's like I get it still wasn't a comfortable conversation to have, and it was still a book I really love, and like it didn't take away from my love of it.
Right.
I still love it as much as I ever did, but it was definitely a hard conversation to have, because you can't get defensive. You have to just like allow the conversation to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of one of the interesting things with, especially with me and Paul and him not being as much of a comic guy, just being like, okay, like how does your brain work when you read this thing and sit down and talk about it? Like, what are the things that you latch onto? That's like, I guess I'm that kind of person too, where I kind of like figuring people out, just like how, like, what makes you tick, you know? How do you think? Stuff like that. So it's always fascinating if they're like, I hate this, or I don't love it. It's like, okay, why? Tell me why. What, you know, what worked out?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know. Yeah.
Well, as a long-time listener, I mean, you know, like, part of the fun was always trying to guess, you know, what your co-host would think of it. Because I know I'd often bring in a book and think, oh, well, Kelly's going to hate this one because it's like a slice of life thing or whatever, and like Andrew's probably going to love it because it has like robots or whatever it is, and like, so it's always kind of fun to guess, because sometimes you'd be completely wrong. No matter how well you know the person. That's true. Depending on the work. Which
is kind of why Paul and I wanted to do what ended up becoming the Captain's Log, because we only had the Whatnauts at the time. And then we started doing like mini episodes for our Patreon supporters, and it was like mini episodes, and then we're like, well, what if we just make it like a second podcast, and it's only for the Patreon people? Because what we would do is we would read the book or watch whatever we were watching that one week, and we wouldn't talk to each other. And then after a while, it was like, dude, like, I kind of just miss like hanging out with you and like talking with you, you know? Like, we don't always have to sit here and talk about comics. And so we're like, why don't we just like make another show of just us like hanging out and talking, you know, like what we would do if we went out and ate, you know? Or, you know.
Yeah, well, and I actually think that's super. I think that's super important, and I know that's something as Out of the Fridge got more and more successful, it got harder to do those like small moments, because it was like we often record 2 episodes at once just so that we never missed anything, and then, you know, we were doing all these cons and library appearances, but then like the random just like hangouts or whatever, or even just like the pre-show banter got shorter and shorter. Because I used to think, like, why would anyone want to listen to that? Because like a good friend Tony Asaro would ask like, oh, what happens before you record? What does that sound like? What happens with all that stuff? Because we would mention in show things that we, you know, had talked about off mic. And Tony in particular was really like, hey, whoa, I want to hear about Kelly's grandpa, right? And so that's what we started doing for our Patreon supporters, was like, well, I guess if we're, whatever mics are rolling anyway, just, you could listen to the live stream if you wanted. And you know, because sometimes it was like 5 minutes, sometimes it was 45 minutes of just like random, complete bullshit before we would actually start an episode. So I always thought it was interesting that people like actually wanted that, but I guess that's kind of how I view the Captain's Log now. Is like, that's really like just like the conversation between friends, and I think that is valuable, and I think that is something that people want, and it's something that I enjoy, you know, being a part of. So now, even though it was like when we were first asked, I was like, that's so weird, but I'm like, no, I totally see the value in it. I think that's really cool. And one of the best compliments we ever got was people saying like, I feel like I'm the fly on the wall during your conversation, you know, like I feel like I'm a part of it. And like, that's awesome. That's huge. That's like, you know, the highest praise I could ever get.
So I don't know when exactly you need to go. We've been talking for an hour already, but
I can go for at least another 30 if we need to, or 30 to 45, and then I gotta start getting ready.
Okay, cool. I have a question, because I have a friend I gave some advice to recently about podcasting stuff, and when I try and give advice, like, I don't, like, I try and do it like, hey, this is what I'm personally working on or trying to figure out and stuff like that. It's not like, well, you need to do it this way, because especially with podcasting, like, there is no wrong way to do it. You can just do what you want, and that's a show, you know?
Every show's different. Every coast is different. Absolutely.
Exactly. But where, like, because as I went from like first figuring out that I like from listening to podcast to figuring out that hey, I could do one to actually making one. I've also noticed that like my inspirations for the the show that I'm making has changed or like moved on, and so like I think recently noticed myself looking at more and more like I guess like bigger name shows or more professionally made shows, and so like I'm trying to figure out the line between like just hanging out with my friends and talking, and also actually being an entertainer. Like I know people are listening in, you know, so I do kind of have to entertain them. So where do you draw the line with that, or where do you think the balance fits with that? Because like one thing, especially on the review show, that I try and do is at the start just like be very enthusiastic. Like you have to have passion, you have to have energy, or else it's just kind of like this monotone like, well, thank you guys for joining us, you know. So like, yeah, like,
you know what's really funny, on a related note, man, is that randomly I'll read like, you know, how to have a successful podcast, because I always find those articles funny. And one of the number one piece of advice is to speak in NPR voice. It's like, oh yeah, you want to be like level all the time and just have like radio voice. I'm like, oh, that is the opposite of what I do, man. I am like super animated, and like that's just me though, you know.
Yeah.
And like, man, I'm not. I mean, I'll be honest, like, you know, no disrespect to it, but oh my god, what was the what was the show that blew up really big a few years ago? It was like an NPR show.
Serial.
Serial? Yeah, that show was boring as shit. I'm sorry.
What?
That show was so boring to me. Like, I tried it. I almost fell asleep listening to it. 'Cause it was
first
like so
season was
monotone.
amazing.
Like,
Second was terrible after that.
Show. It was that NPR thing, man. It was like, it was so NPR. It was so like.
I mean, yeah, it's very much that style.
Again, I know there's a lot of people that love it. I mean, that show was a huge hit for a reason, but for me personally, nah, wasn't into it.
How dare you?
I never feel the need to perform. I feel like I'm always me, love it or hate it. There's definitely people on the fridge that thought I was a giant asshole or whatever, and that's fine. I'm me all the time. The only reason I'm entertaining is that I am passionate about what I'm passionate about. Like I do, you know, I did a comic book show for a long time because I love comic books. I've just been a lifelong geek, and with questionable commentary, I mean, that one was Jess's idea, but me and Jess had already been hanging out because, you know, we're friends, and we just we'd already watched movies together and whatever anyway, just because, you know, we're friends, and we'd end up just, you know, talking shit about each other just because, well, we're friends, and that's what our friendship is.
Yeah,
is this very kind of adversarial, like just ribbing each other all the time. But then she also will jokingly say, "Oh yeah, I'm like your unpaid intern," even though she's, you know, a college graduate and I am not. So she's more educated than me, but she's my unpaid intern, right? It's like the ongoing joke forever. It's gonna be funny when she gets like a PhD or something, and I'll still be calling her my unpaid intern.
We have that on our
with that,
website.
It was like, well, let's.
Underneath her picture, it says the unpaid intern.
If you look on her Twitter profile, it says that. She's very proud of that moniker. It's really funny. But with that show, I mean, that's also something I'm passionate about. Just because, like, with comics, it's not cocky to say that I'm an expert, because I am. I mean, I've been reading comics my whole life. That doesn't mean that there's not more that I can learn, because I'm always learning. But
sure.
I mean, like, when I say something about if I state something like a fact about a comic, like I know what I talk about, and I've already researched it. Like, if it's opinion-based, I'll say, well, I think it's this or whatever. But, like, if I say, oh, it's this thing, it's because I know it. But that's, like, the only area I can think of, like, in my entire life that I can, like, speak with that authority. Because, again, I've been reading comics for over 30 years. I've worked in a comic store for almost 7. Like, I know my shit. Movies, I'm not an expert on anything at all. I love movies like any average person does. But, like, with that show, the enthusiasm comes from like hanging out with my friend, and that's the vibe, and that's why we call the show Questionable Commentary for a reason, because if you're looking for, oh, and this establishing shot here really sets the mood, like, that's not your
I
show.
thought these
Like,
guys were experts.
I'm not a film expert. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you want to hear us just, shit talk each other, then, oh, you're in for a damn good time then at that point. So that's like, yeah, with Indie Focus, all I'm trying to do is hone what I did on Out of the Fridge and just narrow the scope a little more. Because I love Marvel and DC,
sure.
A lot of their stuff, but as far as like why I podcast, I always wanted it to be shining a light on creators that maybe you didn't know about. And
sure.
Like I love Batman, I love Wonder Woman, all that stuff's cool. There's a lot of really good books out there, and and I'll recommend them all day. At the same time, like, do I need to tell you to read Batman? I mean, I don't.
Not really.
Those books
Yeah.
sell well enough. And again, you can always hit me up on Twitter or whatever if you want specific recommendations. But I started to find doing Fridge that the things that I was most excited about were the original graphic novels and the indie books that weren't getting the big press, and those are the ones that I noticed a lot of people would listen to those ones, and you had a pretty consistent listenership regardless, but it seemed like people were the most appreciative of those episodes because, like, hey, you turned me on to this cool creator that I'd never heard of, and then I went to like my local con 2 months later and they were there and I got to talk to them, and like,
oh, you're
to me that's
dude
amazing.
Did this book. I read that book.
I don't know. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool and so exciting. And so I don't know. I guess that's just moving forward. With Indie Focus, what I want to do is like, what if I only did that? That's all
that's
I
cool.
did was like the cool, self-published and whatever. And that way, it's like I still know comics really well, even if I don't know like these particular creators well. Like I understand how comics, function as a piece of sequential art. So. It's really exciting. And we've already recorded the first episode, me and Belinda. It was just like an intro, just us kind of getting to intro ourselves and just really make sure that we click, and we definitely do, which wasn't surprising because we seem to have got we seem to get along, but the internet's a funny thing. You can feel like people pretty well even if you don't. But
yeah.
Recording the first one was really cool and really exciting, and it was effortless. And Belinda's enthusiasm. It's probably even more than mine. She's younger. She has more energy.
She seems super cool. We'll have to get her on a Captain's Log soon here. That's my plan.
I'd love to have Belinda on the main show, or on the Whatnauts as well, because Belinda's super awesome. She, if you don't know who Belinda Garcia is yet, she's doing my co-host on Indie Focus. She's a writer for Geeks of Color. She's a college student. She's really awesome. She's a cosplayer, lifelong geek, huge Pixar fan.
Yeah, she is.
And just quality human being.
So I'll get to talk with her about this at some point. But I know she's also a big fan of the Great Gatsby. I think she has a collection of those books.
So many copies of that book.
I have a really weird story about the Great Gatsby that I cannot wait to tell her when we are on a podcast together. Because it's a strange story, but yeah, that is my plan.
I'd like to go back if we can. I know
Whatnauts.
you started talking about like looking at the bigger shows. I know. With Out of the Fridge, we got to the point where, as far as like popularity, downloads, reach, social media wise, I felt like we had probably about capped out with where we could go, without being a part of a larger network. And I'd reached out to a few networks, and always got rejected because we were too feminist focused, which was weird, or because we cursed and we didn't want to edit ourselves.
Fuck that.
So for one reason or another, yeah, it seems like weird reasons to get rejected, but for one reason or another, we just no one wanted us, and so we just kind of kept doing our own thing. But I know I did get to the point where I thought, well, gosh, would we have to join like the Nerdist or Max Fun or something to like get to that next level?
Yikes,
and it
good
felt
thing
like
you didn't
probably,
join
but
the
I also,
Nerdist right now.
Well, no, I know, and in hindsight,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that didn't happen. But I know we got there to that point where I thought, well, I felt like we'd kind of plateaued, and I didn't really know how to move forward because I mean, you can't really control that stuff. I mean, like I can make the show as good as I can make it, but I can't make people listen. And I'm a pretty good hype man, but again, all I can do is throw the word out there. And yeah, for that one on how to like grow past a certain point, I don't really have an answer, but I know I definitely never felt the need to try to copy any of their shows. In fact, I felt like that was like the last thing that I should do.
Sure.
Felt like the people that like my show like it because it is authentic, and to me, authenticity goes a long way. I feel like tons of shows are comic book shows, and so like we knew going in we weren't going to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And we did a book club style format, so even though we weren't reviewing shows, we were having an in-depth discussion. We weren't the only ones. Like View from the Gutters had a very similar format to ours.
Yep.
And their show was fantastic, and I loved their show. And I never felt like we were like aping their show or whatever, because again, it's not like they invented the book club style format either. In fact, they used to jokingly refer to their show as like Oprah's comic book club or something ridiculous like that. They were always hoping for a cease and desist letter that never came. But Oprah's apparently got bigger fish to fry. But yeah, it was one of those like, well, as long as I knew that I was being true to myself and that my friends were being honest, and as long as we were having fun together doing it, that was the important thing. Because that was like anytime a friend would come to me that was also a podcaster and ask like, how do I expand my reach, my answer was like, I mean, I don't really know past like just being yourself. I mean, like I can give you tips as far as like how you want to tag things when you're sharing episodes or whatever, but yeah, as far as like the show itself, it's like, dude, just make it the best that you can and think like, why am I doing it, not someone else. And that's it, man.
Make it for you. Be 100% you. Because because one of the things that I've been looking at now is like you mentioned, the NPR style stuff is very monotone. It's very kind of one note, and it like that has a time and place. But like I'm like more recently, someone who's kind of inspiring me is Greg Miller from Kind of Funny, and he is over the top sometimes on just like how passionate he is or how energetic, and like you said, like I don't want to be him. I don't want to copy him, because then my show is not authentic. It's not me, right? So then the question kind of becomes like, okay, well, what is my version of that? Like how do I make that mine? Like, what do I look like in I guess my own version of that, and how do I bring that level of passion to my stuff? And so it's hard, because then there's days where I'm like, okay, maybe that was a little too much not like me and too much like him and stuff like that, or too much like this show, or I don't know.
Yeah, and it's hard too, man, because I know, again, I always inject myself into my shows, and in doing so I leave myself pretty vulnerable, and open to attack at times, and I have been attacked because of it, and it's one of those things that's never made me want to change it, because that's just who I am, and that's the show that I want to make. And I feel I'm one of those people, I guess I'm confident enough in myself that, like, look, if you don't like me while I'm being legitimate, then like I'm okay with it. I'd rather
then we know it's not going to work.
The genuine me than you love the fake me, and that's just me, I guess. But yeah, to me, it's like I love, I listen, when I listen to the Whatnauts, just like the little anecdotal little bits, like you mentioned, like work and things like that. It's like, anytime I get to feel that I know you better, those are the things that endear me to you, and those are the kind of things that kept me as a listener, going.
Exactly.
And like the Whatnauts is one of, like, I think 3 or 4 shows that I've consistently stayed listening to because of it, because I felt like I had a connection that I wasn't getting from other shows. Because often you guys would cover things that I didn't know what they were, like anime or whatever. It's like, I'm probably never going to watch it, but I really like you, and I really like Paul, and I really like your take on it, even if it was like, I don't know what it is. It's like, I still enjoyed the show anyway and found it just entertaining and endearing. And so, yeah, I've just always strived to do that. And I've heard that from people as well, where it's like, yeah, I don't even know what that book is, but, you know, you guys are really funny talking about it or whatever. And it's like, well, that's cool. Yeah. That's awesome, man, because that's the highest form of praise, is if someone's like, man, I don't even know what that book is. I might never read it, but you know what, man?
It was fun to just like, cool. Be there and listen in, yeah.
Yeah. To me, it should definitely feel like, it's just friends, man. That's just, I guess that's the just general vibe that I'm going for. It's like, just a friendly conversation, as simple as that sounds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I say we wrap things up there. And then you and I know we're trying to figure out a time that we can make this a consistent recording time. But we talked about Fridays, but I guess we'll figure out.
Fridays normally works for me.
Cool. Yeah, we'll.
Yeah, Friday. Like last week was birthday week for my entire family, so that's why last week didn't work. But
yeah,
Fridays moving forward should work for me.
Cool. We will keep people posted on Twitter. If you are not following us on Twitter, you absolutely should be. You can find updates for all of our shows at the Whatnauts on Twitter. You can find me personally at Hush315. And Eric, where can they find you?
I am at the Bobby Krogan on everything. I predominantly post on Twitter and Instagram these days. Also, Eric Mannix Photography on Instagram as well.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, thank you, guys.
My kids have locked themselves in the laundry hamper, so I'm being distracted by my children making a fake jail.
Guys, it's
too
close to real life right now, guys.
I know, no doubt. I'm like, woo.
Yeah, well, cool, guys. If you guys were joining us in the live stream, thank you guys for joining us and watching. If you guys missed the live stream,
thank you, Sam, for the question, definitely.
Yes. This will be up as a podcast and on YouTube the following week, and you can get more updates about us at thewhatnauts.com. Go like, share, subscribe, do all the stuff you have to do. If you like the show, please go to patreon.com/thewhatnauts, and you can join for as little as $1 a month, and you can get all of our episodes early, and hopefully we'll have some more cool stuff coming down the road. We need to get like stickers and stuff like that. I have.
Oh, definitely, man.
I have stickers, but we should kind of figure out our tiers and actually make them like, okay, here's what we're gonna do for this level and stuff like that. But yeah, cool.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Whatnauts.com for all the Whatnauts needs you might have. That being said, my name is Kyle Springer. And your name, good sir?
I have legally changed my name. I am Bob Hoskins now, because Bob Hoskins, the actor, has passed away, and it's too good of a name to not use. So, from this day forward, Bob Hoskins.
There you go. And this has been the Captain's Log. Thank you guys for listening in. We will see you next week.